Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're diving into C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. It's a book that, even though it was written a while back, still feels super relevant, especially now.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to be working with excerpts from the book, and we're going to unpack some really interesting and maybe a little bit challenging questions about what happens when humans try to conquer nature.
Right.
Including human nature itself.
Yeah, that's a big one. And, he uses all these examples like the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
Wireless communication, contraceptives. And all of these are advancements that give humans some measure of control over the natural world.
So right away, Lewis, he uses this phrase, man's conquest of nature. Mm-hmm. But is it really all of humanity that's, part of this conquest?
Well, and that's one of the first things that Lewis kind of pushes back on. He says, it's not really man conquering nature. It's more like some men gaining power over other men by using nature as this tool.
I see.
So it's really about, who controls the airplanes, who controls the information.
Yeah, who's broadcasting.
Exactly.
And then with something like contraceptives,
right,
you're bringing in like a whole other dimension to it.
Right.
It's not just power over other people now.
Yes.
But it's power over
future generators.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And those future generations become subject to the decisions made by the people who came before.
Wow.
And it's interesting, Lewis predicts this rise of what he calls the last men. Okay. Who, ironically, would be the most conditioned and controlled by these advancements.
Even though they think they're the most free.
Even though they might perceive themselves as the most liberated.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing how this idea of conquest can be a little bit misleading.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as it sounds.
Not at all.
So Lewis uses this fictional textbook called The Green Book to kind of illustrate how certain modern thought patterns can erode traditional values. Yeah. I have to admit, when I was reading it, I kind of pictured it as like the villain in the story.
Oh, yeah. It definitely represents a worldview.
Right.
That Lewis is critiquing. And he uses it to highlight how seemingly harmless ideas can lead to some pretty drastic consequences. Yeah. And he gives specific examples from the Green Book to show how it tries to debunk these traditional values.
Right. Like when they say that calling a waterfall sublime is just a statement about how you feel.
Yes.
And not about the waterfall itself.
Exactly. And there's another one about the travel advertisement.
Oh, right.
Where they break it down and they show how it's manipulating people's emotions.
Yeah.
And then there's one about a passage praising horses.
Right.
Which they reduce to basically just factual inaccuracies.
Okay, so what's so bad about this? What's the big deal if someone wants to say that a waterfall is only beautiful?
Right.
Subjectively.
It's about what happens when you apply that kind of thinking to everything.
Okay.
Lewis argues that if we reduce all value judgments to just personal preference, we end up creating what he calls men without chests.
Men without chests. That's a powerful image. What does that even mean?
He means it metaphorically to describe people who are lacking this kind of emotional depth, this spirited element.
Okay.
So they're all head and no heart.
I see.
They can maybe grasp things intellectually.
Yeah.
But they don't have the capacity for real, heartfelt sentiment.
Right.
These feelings that motivate us to virtuous action.
Yeah, good.
Think about it. We all have those moments where we know we should do something.
Oh, yeah.
But we just don't feel it.
Totally.
We're not motivated enough to actually do it.
So it's not just about having the right ideas, it's about cultivating the right feelings, too.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does Lewis say we should do instead of just, debunking all values?
Well, this is where he brings in the idea of the Tao.
Okay.
And it's important to understand that he's not talking specifically about Taoism,
right?
The religion or, the philosophy.
It's more of a general term.
It's a broader term.
Okay.
He's using it to talk about natural law, traditional morality, first principles of practical reason, the things that have been recognized across different cultures and throughout history.
So for Lewis, the Tao is this foundation of objective values.
Right.
Like values that are true no matter what anyone thinks.
Exactly. He believes that certain values just are true or false.
Not just up for debate.
It's not just a matter of opinion or preference. And he pulls evidence from all these different cultures and time periods.
Oh, wow.
To show how the Tao is this universal human inheritance.
So, what kind of examples?
He quotes Confucius, Aristotle, Plato, sources from Hinduism, Christianity, Stoicism.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's this incredibly diverse range of perspectives.
So it's like he's pulling all these threads together of human wisdom to build this argument for the Tao.
And his point is that if we reject the Tao, if we say that all values are just subjective,
then we lose any basis for making moral judgments.
Okay.
We lose the ability to say that anything is truly good or bad.
It's like if everyone's making up their own rules, then the game falls apart.
Exactly.
What about people who say they're creating brand new values? How does Lewis respond to that?
Lewis would say it's impossible to invent truly new values.
Okay.
What seems like a totally new value system is usually just bits and pieces of the Tao.
Okay.
Taken to extremes.
Gotcha.
Or twisted around.
So even the people who think they're rejecting traditional values are still working within this framework of the Tao.
Right.
Even if they don't realize it.
Exactly. And he uses this really helpful analogy to explain it.
Okay, I love analogies.
He says you can't create a new language.
Okay.
By just like randomly changing words and grammar rules.
Right.
Any real development in language has to come from within the system itself.
Okay.
Like a poet finding new ways to express meaning within the existing structure of the language. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like internet slang.
Yes.
They only make sense because they're building on, language we already have.
Exactly. And Lewis says the same thing goes for values.
Okay.
He gives examples like economic value, duty to posterity, and nationalism.
Okay.
All things that might seem like new inventions.
Right.
But they actually have roots in the Tao, even if they've been modified or emphasized differently.
That's so interesting. So this whole idea of the Tao, it's really like the key to understanding Lewis's argument.
It's really central.
But I want to talk about the dystopian parts of the book.
Okay.
The conditioners.
Ah.
That's kind of scary.
The conditioners are Lewis's thought experiment about what happens when humans gain complete control over human nature.
Through science.
Through science and psychological manipulation.
That's like the ultimate conquest of nature taken to the extreme.
Yes, it is.
And it's a scary thought.
Yeah.
That there could be people out there who can shape our desires, our values, even our beliefs.
Yeah.
Using technology.
It's this unsettling possibility of a future.
Right.
Where humans are completely engineered.
Oh, wow.
And their values and desires are implanted.
From the outside.
From the outside.
Not even coming from within.
Exactly.
This raises a big question for me, though.
Okay.
If the conditioners have rejected objective values.
Right.
If they don't believe in the Tao.
Yeah.
Then what's motivating them?
That's a good question.
What guides their decisions about how to shape the future?
That is the question that leads to Lewis's most disturbing conclusion. He says that without that grounding in the Tao, the conditioners, they basically become slaves to their own impulses.
Oh, wow.
So they're controlled by nature.
Okay.
In the most basic amoral sense.
So the people who think they're conquering nature end up being conquered by it.
It's ironic, isn't it?
It really is.
And Lewis doesn't stop there.
What do you mean?
He asks if the conditioners in their perfect world might actually envy the humans that they've conditioned.
You mean envy the people who can still feel real emotions?
Exactly. Even if those emotions are, kind of engineered.
That's a really interesting point.
He wonders if in their pursuit of total control, the conditioners have accidentally stripped themselves of something really important to the human experience.
Like what?
The capacity for real joy, sorrow, love, even despair.
It's like they've got all the control, but none of the things that make life worth living.
It makes you question what the point of all that control is.
Right, if it leads to a world without any meaning.
Exactly.
I can see how someone reading Lewis might think that he's anti-science or anti-progress.
I can see that.
But it seems like his argument is more complex than that.
You're right. He's not saying we should reject science or technology.
Okay.
He was actually a big believer in human reason. Okay. But what he's warning us about is what you might call scientism.
Scientism.
This idea that science alone
can explain everything about reality.
So it's not science itself that's the problem.
Right.
It's these overblown claims that people make.
It's about the limits of science.
Okay.
Lewis believes science is really powerful for understanding the material world.
Right.
But it can't tell us everything about being human.
Okay.
It can't really explain value or meaning or purpose.
So if we can't rely on science to be our only guide, where do we turn?
Well, Lewis points us back to the Tao.
Okay.
He says the Tao, this tradition of shared human values and wisdom, offers us this framework.
For understanding the world.
For understanding the world and our place in it.
Okay.
And it gives us these principles for living a good and meaningful life.
Even when things are hard.
Even in the face of suffering and uncertainty.
But isn't the Tao like a product of its time?
You mean because it's so old?
Yeah, how can something from ancient cultures still be relevant to us today?
Lewis knew that.
He recognized that the Tao has been interpreted in all these different ways throughout history.
But he still thinks it's relevant.
But he says the core principles.
Like justice, mercy?
Exactly. Justice, mercy, courage, love.
Okay.
They have this timeless and universal quality. They speak to something deep within us.
So it's not about following all the old rules.
No.
It's more about understanding the deeper meaning behind them.
It's about understanding those principles and applying them to our own lives.
In a way that makes sense for us.
Right. Lewis saw the Tao as this living tradition. Something that can change and adapt to meet the needs of each new generation.
I like that.
But he warned against, completely reinventing it. Or throwing it out.
Because we could lose something important.
Yeah, we could lose something really essential.
Right.
Something that connects us to those deepest truths.
About ourselves.
About ourselves and the world around us.
It's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We can see farther because of the wisdom that's been passed down to us.
Yes, and we have this responsibility.
To keep passing it on.
To keep that tradition alive.
Right, and make it relevant for the future.
Exactly.
We've covered so much.
I know, right?
Man's conquest of nature, the Tao, the conditioners.
It's a lot.
So why does all this matter to us today?
That's the question we should always ask ourselves.
Right.
And I think Lewis would say that these questions, they're even more relevant now.
Than when he was writing.
Than back then.
Why?
Well, look around, think about it.
Okay.
We live in a world where technology is advancing so fast.
It's crazy.
We have access to information and power.
Yeah.
That Lewis could have never imagined.
Yeah, that's true.
We're on the verge of being able to manipulate the human genome.
Wow.
Create AI that's as smart as we are.
That's a little scary.
Engineer entire realities using virtual and augmented reality.
I know, it's mind-blowing.
And with all that power
comes responsibility.
Come an enormous responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The choices we make today about how we use this technology.
About the values that are guiding us.
They're going to shape the future of humanity.
In a big way.
In huge ways. And we're facing a similar choice to the one Lewis presented.
I mean, about whether to conquer or to
To conquer or to coexist.
Yeah.
To control or to connect.
Okay.
Will we use this power to improve human life? Or will we end up diminishing it?
That's a big question.
Will we become slaves to technology and our own desires?
Right.
Or will we find a way to live in harmony?
With nature.
With nature, with each other.
And with ourselves.
And with ourselves.
A little daunting.
It is.
But also exciting.
It's both, isn't it?
We're at a turning point.
We really are.
I think Lewis, despite all his warnings, still believed in the possibility of, redemption.
I think you're right.
He thought we could choose a different path.
A path that leads to a better future.
A more just future.
More humane, more meaningful.
So it's not just all doom and gloom.
No, there's hope there.
There's a glimmer of hope.
He gives us this vision of what he calls a regenerate science.
So regenerate science.
A science that knows its limits.
Okay.
A science that works with the wisdom of the Tao.
So we can use science and technology.
Yeah.
But we have to do it in a way.
In a way that serves those highest human values.
Okay.
Instead of undermining them.
That's a beautiful vision.
It is.
But what would that even look like in real life?
That's the question, isn't it?
How can we create this regenerate science?
What would it mean for us?
Right. How do we live our lives?
How do we make decisions?
How do we shape the world around us?
Yeah.
That's a great question. How do we take these big philosophical ideas and actually apply them to our lives?
Right.
How do we even begin to think about this regenerate science?
Well, I think one way to start is to just be more aware
of
the values that are shaping our choices, both individually and as a society. We often think we're making decisions that are purely rational. But really, our choices are always informed by our values.
Even if we don't realize it.
Whether we're conscious of them or not.
Okay, so to bring it back to Lewis's main point, where do you stand on this whole objective values versus subjective preferences debate?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something like the Tao?
Right.
This set of universal principles that goes beyond just individual opinions.
Yeah.
It's something I've thought about a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't have all the answers.
Of course.
But I do think Lewis makes a pretty strong argument.
For the Tao.
Yeah, for the existence of some kind of objective moral order.
Okay.
I mean, we see it reflected in different cultures around the world, in their wisdom traditions, even in little kids.
Really?
That sense of fairness and justice.
Oh, yeah.
And in our own, like, gut feelings about what's right and wrong.
You know, it makes you wonder if we can ever really separate facts from values, even in science.
Right.
Which we think of as objective.
Yeah.
Aren't there always values involved when we decide what to study?
Totally.
What risks are worth taking, how to use new discoveries.
Absolutely, values are always there.
Even if we pretend they're not?
Even when we try to ignore them.
And I think that's like one of the biggest takeaways from the abolition of man.
What do you mean?
This call to be more self-aware.
Oh, okay.
About the values that are driving us, to be more honest and open about them.
I like that.
To actually talk about them.
Yeah, have those conversations.
So Lewis is basically saying, we need to step back from the technical stuff.
Okay.
And ask ourselves those bigger questions.
Yeah, the why.
Yeah, why are we doing all this?
Right. What kind of world are we creating?
This has been an amazing conversation.
It really has.
But I want to end with a little thought experiment.
Okay.
Lewis paints this picture of what could happen if we go down this road.
Of abolishing man.
Yeah, through technology and social engineering.
Right.
But he doesn't really offer any solutions.
No, he doesn't.
So let's say the conditioners are real.
Okay.
And they offer you a spot in their perfect world. No suffering, no conflict, no injustice.
Wow.
Would you take it?
That's a tough one.
I know, right?
I mean, a world without suffering.
Everyone's needs are met.
Yeah, no more war or poverty.
Sign me up.
Sounds pretty good.
Right?
But then I start thinking,
about
at what cost?
Yeah.
Do we have to give up our freedom to get that?
Our individuality.
Our ability to truly love and care for each other.
Would it even be worth it?
Would we even recognize ourselves in that world?
And can you really engineer happiness?
Can you manufacture meaning?
Or does that go against what those things even are?
Those are the questions Lewis leaves us with.
He doesn't make it easy for us.
No easy answers.
But I think he'd say that wrestling with these questions, this conversation about what it means to be human,
especially now,
that's a big part of what makes us human.
I love that.
It's not about finding all the answers.
It's about asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And being okay with not knowing everything.
Embracing the mystery.
The complexity.
Well said.
It's all part of the human experience.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It really has.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the abolition of man.
It's been a pleasure.
It's a book that really makes you think about some of the most important questions of our time.
It really does.
And to all of you listening out there, keep those brains buzzing. Keep those hearts open.
And keep questioning.
Keep exploring.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.